The much anticipated motion, Zionism is Racism, has stalled at the Green Party Spring Conference. The UK Green Party's planned vote on a Zionism is Racism motion did not proceed after multiple no confidence votes were submitted, creating delays and meaning it was never heard or debated. Members of the party brought motion A105 Zionism is Racism in February, which defines Zionism as racism, recognizes its continued harm actually, to Palestinians, and would position the stance of the Green Party as anti-Zionist. However, according to the Telegraph, members backed by the Jewish Greens submitted a motion to restrict the use of the terms Zionist and anti-Zionist in official party communications in an effort to stop the Zionism is Racism proposal. Supporters of Zionism is Racism then fast-tracked the motion, which meant it would be heard much earlier than first planned. However, before it was able to be heard, multiple motions of no confidence in the chair were submitted, one after another, in an effective filibuster. Under the Green Party's constitution, all no confidence motions must be debated, which took up the remaining conference time, even with an extension, and meant that the Zionism is Racism motion and its 4 amendments were not heard, debated, or voted on. The motion can still be heard at a later conference. So was this a deliberate sabotage, or did the motion, get caught up in procedure? I mean, I do think restricting the use of, or the words Zionism and anti-Zionism is absurd, and of course that would mean debating the motion would be impossible. And according to that article, apparently the Jewish Greens were seemingly frustrating the process. The group, that is, not Jewish Green members. But does that mean that this was like a top-down coordinated effort to stop the motion? I don't know. However, the Canary shared this screenshot of Green Party councillor Andre Fries. She posted, "I'm relieved to say that the anti-Semitic Zionism is Racism motion failed to pass at Green Party Spring Conference yesterday. This was despite shenanigans by the proposers and supporters to get it up the agenda. Importantly, Green MP Carla Denyer was planning to speak against the motion on behalf of the MPs, peers, Leader Zach Polanski and Deputy Leader Rachel Millward. The hard work of reaching out to the proposers to come to a realistic accommodation on this motion that doesn't endanger Jews needs to start. We will need mediators to help us through this." I think that is an absolutely insane thing to say. It's not an anti-Semitic piece of legislation. And she's mentioning there that we need to amend this bill or motion to make sure that it doesn't endanger Jewish people. I've read the motion. It doesn't endanger Jewish people. And calling the motion anti-Semitic is absolutely wild. I mean, Zionism is a political ideology, and calling it out for its racism is not anti-Semitic. Now, Fries also claims that Carla Denyer was going to speak against the motion with the apparent backing of Zach Polanski and Rachel Millward. Now, is this true? Who knows? Honestly, don't know. Now, look, I don't have a problem with people using their democratic right to debate against this motion, right? And Zach has publicly said he thinks this current form of Zionism is bad. Now, my disagreement with him is that there are different forms of Zionism. I think he's doing a bit of Zionism revisionism. I don't agree with him. But my bigger concern is MPs and leadership figures would have weight on a particular motion when they should be impartial. But again, that is just a claim from Fries. Now, the author of the motion, Nubla Smyton, trying to get on the show tonight, but she was so busy we couldn't. But I did get a comment from her, and she was at the party conference. She had a speech as well, but this is what she wrote to me. "The conference witnessed Zionism in practice as a small group sabotaged the conference with delays, filibustering, abuses of the party constitution, code of conduct, and philosophical belief. They stooped to new lows by also sabotaging other motions in an attempt to take up precious conference time and reduce the chance of our motion being heard, which resulted in other motions also not being heard. The majority voted against their request to rule our motion out of order. The majority voted in favour of prioritising our motion to be heard. After all the attacks, including approx 6 votes of no confidence in the chair at several intervals, again, To prevent the motion being heard, a member of the party requested extra time for us to continue and vote for the motion. This was also supported by the majority. Their attacks on democracy and the abuse of party process demonstrated further that we are confronting and why this motion is necessary. This is just the beginning. I couldn't be more proud of everyone who has tirelessly and determinedly turned up to support us for the huge and obvious victory this truly was. Giving up is not an option. We will return. By the way, that motion will be debated again at conference. Now, to in the interest of balance, I'm going to read a couple of tweets from a thread from Gary Spedding, who broke down a lot of the internal communications. I suppose it's not internal; it was publicly viewable of the conference. And Gary Spedding says, based on multiple conversations I've had with numerous Green Party members, I've started to understand more clearly what unfolded over this weekend at the Green Party Spring Conference. It's a messy affair full of disruptions, insults, procedural issues, and malicious activity. Now, most of these, or all of them, he says, came from the motion A105, Zionism is racism. The first thing Green members were asked to vote was asked to vote on was a submission that would declare the motion out of order. This was a war of procedural motions ensued all day long. The voting system crashed because so many people tried to vote. Gary says, I've asked Jewish Green Party members their thoughts on claims that anti-Semites have found a home in the Green Party, and there is no internal challenge to problematic or racist behaviour activities. The response have been clear. That's absolutely not true. If you want evidence that there is indeed internal debate and challenges to issues relating to anti-Semitism, Zionism and Israel, then look at what happened during the Spring Conference. The entire thing was an internal challenge. That's why Zionism is racism didn't get debated. He then says, I'm told that due to the poor behaviour of Green members on both sides of the argument, coupled with the abuse of procedural motions and clauses, the entire conference became a shit show, and that it was total chaos that derailed other important motions and policy decisions. What is very interesting is that before the Spring Conference, very little organising had been done on the Zionism is racism motion beyond encouraging people to join the party and vote in favour of the motion. Nobody mentions that the motion was at the bottom of the priority list. Weeks before the Spring Conference, there was a members' ballot for setting prioritisation on motions. During this phase of the procedures, the Zionism is racism motion came almost last on the priority list. Once conference was arised, efforts to change the motion priority started. At least 9 members of the Greens that I've spoken to have told me that Greens for Palestine encouraged a lot of people to flood in with membership applications and to sign up for Spring Conference. Most of those people didn't understand anything about the party or its procedures. He says a lot of people joined for this motion. 2 Jewish Greens have told me that it wasn't just pro-Palestine people flooding the Green Party with membership requests and applications to attend Spring Conference. There is a core of 7 or 8 pro-Israel activists also in the Green Party organising support for Israel. A key issue I found at the stage of my conversations was that there were only around 800 people or less at this shit show of a conference in a party now boasting over 200,000 members. Again, I mean, people should go check out this thread from Gary Spedding. He documents quite a lot, but what he's saying here is a bit more nuance. He's saying, based on conversations, those that tried to get people to sign up to the Zionism is racism motion didn't tell people that in terms of the priority list, it wasn't high. And then lots of people sort of joined the party to vote for it. But actually, there was also pro-Israel people trying to get involved too, and the procedures was all a bit messy. So obviously, Lubna claims, and other people who support this motion have claimed that it's sort of a Zionist stitch-up. Other people are saying it wasn't a Zionist stitch-up. There were people who were pro-Israel that were trying to stitch it up. There were people that are trying to get the motion blocked, but a lot of it was just down to procedure. I, for one, think that the Green Party having, especially with 200,000 members, having a Spring Conference online is not a good idea. I mean, there was even a vote on nationalisation, and that got voted against. And it was out of like, what, 400 people, 500 people against 200,000 members. So maybe just the entire setup of a small amount of people going to online conference isn't a good idea. Callum, Many people support this motion, including myself, by the way. But do you think there's a danger of this becoming a sort of distraction where we should all come together to oppose the genocide?
I mean, it already is a distraction, isn't it? Because it's what everyone's talking about rather than opposing the genocide, as far as the Green Party is concerned at the moment. But I want to say I didn't attend Spring Conference. I actually voted in favour of having Spring Conference again a couple of years ago because it had been like we never used to have it. Like they got rid of it, and I can see why. Because I think I thought when I was voting that we'd have an in-person conference. Well, no, it was online. It's my understanding. I reached out to somebody within the Green Party for some information today, and 2,000 people were signed up to attend conference. And conference was advertised as being sold out. So we don't know how many places they had. I tried to get that information, but I wasn't able to get an exact figure. But 2,000 people signed up to attend. There's over 220,000 members in the party now. Having an online conference where they only had one day for policy. I mean, yesterday was all just training and lectures, essentially. Like there was no policy days yesterday, which there could have been, but there wasn't. That was also just nonsensical. It's probably worth pointing out that Stats for Lefties has said that she was one of the people that essentially caused problems in terms of time being wasted by putting in a vote of no confidence in the chair. But she did it because of what she said was a case of a transphobic comment from the chair. I don't know if it was aimed at her or somebody else. And obviously she's pointed out she's absolutely in favour of this motion. So there was certainly stuff that was going on that delayed proceedings that weren't directly aimed at trying to stop this motion from passing. But this motion was never going to pass this weekend. It was number 12 on the list. They had a vote in conference to raise it up to number 3. Even then, it was never going to. They were never going to get the time to do it in one day, even without the filibustering that was going on. It was always going to end up being prioritised for the autumn. And I mean, look, as far as the Carla Denny thing's concerned, I mean, let's see what she had to say, right? I'd be interested in hearing her argument against the motion, actually. I am in support of it in theory, but it'd be interesting to hear that argument. Well, we never got to hear that argument because we ran out of time, which is always the way. Now, Flow Snakes pointed out in the comments that Kerno Damo has done a really good video on this. I actually watched it earlier just to try and catch up with what was going on, and he outlines quite a lot of detail just the mess, the shit show that went on. But I'll be honest with you, as much as I want to come here and rave and support the Green Party, I'm really struggling to with this weekend because the procedures and the processes that underpin the democratic process of the Green Party, while they're great in practice, one member, one vote, brilliant, perfect, everyone gets a chance to vote. The voting system crashed with 1,000 odd people trying to vote. Could you imagine if every member had actually tried to join conference at the weekend? One, there wouldn't have been enough places for everyone, and two, the system wouldn't have allowed any votes because it wouldn't have been able to cope. So the infrastructure, which in fairness isn't necessarily the fault of the party, it was designed at a time when they had 20,000 members. They've now got 200,000 more members than that. But there is a huge need, very, very urgently, for the internal infrastructure within the processes to be updated. The problem is a lot of internal process is also democratically elected on within conference, and they didn't get to vote on any of the procedural motions that were on the agenda because they didn't have time. And this is always the case. When I attended conference in person 2 years ago, half of the first day was spent just on process stuff, and that we didn't get to the policy stuff. So I think there needs to be a huge rethink about how Green Party process works. As far as the actual motion is concerned, it is clear that there were people within the party who desperately wanted to prevent this motion from being debated. The ironic thing is if they hadn't have wasted time, even with it being moved up the list, I don't think they'd have had time to vote on it anyway. They'd have had time to have a bit of a debate and hear each side of the story and each side of the argument, but it still wouldn't have made it to a vote. It was never going to get voted on this weekend. But as Damo points out in his video, the fact that people had to use process to try and stop it shows that there is huge support for this motion. There was a vote at the beginning of conference to try and rule the motion out of order, which means it would have been completely removed from the agenda. That was voted down. There was also a move by the Standing Orders Committee to try and I don't know the ins and outs of it, but essentially to try and take sort of some control back, where they would actually be able to decide what motions didn't get voted on that day, which in theory could have meant they could have turned around and said any motion they don't like, we're not even going to hear, and then it wouldn't be able to come back because it would have been removed from the agenda. And naturally, that was also voted against, rightfully, as it should have been. But the only way that people that were against this motion had to try and show that was to filibuster and to fight back with process, and it's a complete shit show. I'm really, in some ways, I'm glad I didn't attend, because it would have just been a nightmare. And you know what? You know what's really funny? I've seen I've seen a lot of your party members like looking at this and completely slagging off the way that it works. And some would argue, particularly in the Green Party, well, who are they to pass comment on, internal squabbles within parties and procedure that doesn't help the members. But actually, I honestly think when it comes to this, having also been at your party conference, that your party's process certainly seemed a lot cleaner, despite the arguments and despite the crap that went on there, than the Green Party process at the moment. And I think part of that's because it was an online conference. And you had people. I mean, I don't know how many Green Party members are watching this, but I'm a member, as people know, and I've been an active member. A new conference was happening. I hardly got any correspondence about it. I think I got one or two emails. I think the rest of the correspondence might have gone to my spam, but I hardly saw anything about it. And there were new members that would be joining the party over the last few months that didn't even know we were having a spring conference. Like, that's an issue. We've been great with comms on a national level, communicating our procedures and our policies and our beliefs and our values to the general public. Fantastic, great. But I think internally there is still a huge problem with internal comms to the membership, in terms of what is actually going on, what motions are being debated and discussed, and the importance of those motions, as well as a huge problem, as I say, with how all the process and procedures are designed, as they were created, like I said, for a party of a much smaller membership.
There was also a tweet I missed from Gary Spedding's thread, which I want to highlight to maybe add further clarification. He says, from the perspective of several Jewish Greens, including anti-Zionist Jewish Greens, the main issue they took with the motion A105 is that it doesn't simply focus on Zionism, but also goes after the Greens' adoption of the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism. And that is true. When you read the motion, it's not just saying we're claiming that Zionism is racism. The specific text does go after current Green Party guidance on anti-Semitism. Now, for me, and this is my personal view, I think it was important to include that because I went through some of the existing guidance on anti-Semitism in the Green Party, and I wasn't particularly happy with it. I think there was lots of interpretation where you could criticize Israel, and that could be lumped under anti-Semitism. One example was saying about the size of the Israel lobby, and it sort of said, people could see that as you saying Jews control everything. I was like, sure, that is a conspiracy theory, but it's also true that Israel has a mighty lobby, and talking about the Israeli lobby and how it pretty much controls a lot of things, it's not anti-Semitic. So there were certain unclear things. And again, I think it's about, I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of the procedures. I mean, you've got 200,000 members in the Green Party. When it comes to Labour, I suppose they had the apparatus because their membership size has gone up and down. But,
also
they had millions of members at one point, whereas the Greens have never had this amount of members.
But also, Curtis, the Labour Party, importantly in this case, they don't have a one-member, one-vote system. They elect delegates who then go and represent their local parliament, their local constituency party, right? So every constituency essentially elects, a handful of people to go and represent the views of all the other members from that area. And I don't want the Green Party to have that. I think one member, one vote is the best way to do it. It is the most democratic. But if you are going to give 220,000 plus people the chance to vote, you need to make sure that if all of them wanted to vote, they would be able to vote. Just as far as the motion goes, though, I think another point that's I think is also worth considering, just to play devil's advocate with the other side of the argument here. I'm still struggling to see what it's trying to achieve outside of deciding a definition and a sort of a value for the Green Party to adhere to and to stand by. There's no sort of policy that they could. I mean, you can't take that to the doorstep and say, "Oh well, we voted to say Zionism is racism."
Yeah,
How does that translate on the doorstep? It doesn't translate at all. It's a row, arguably, about definitions, very very important definitions, and for what it's worth, I do think on balance I do support the motion. However, I think there are many people in the party that are looking at this from the other side, which is what's the public perception of it? And if that motion doesn't achieve anything practical that can be applied, and also, it's not like we've got huge problems within the party where we've got disciplinary action being taken against people because of definitions of anti-Semitism or, differences in definitions of Zionism and how we look at that within the party. If all that was going on and it was maybe being skewed where it wasn't accurate, then fair enough. It might be worth it. Like in the case of the trans rights disciplinaries, where we've actually said as a party, no, actually we do recognise that trans women are women. And if you don't think that, then you can fuck off. But I do think there are many people within the party who are worried about the public opinion of this. Now, there's two ways that can be looked at. The first way is how we're looking at everyone else. Well, who gives a shit? Because we know it's the right thing to do, so should we do it anyway? We can defend it, and it will be defended. And in the grand scheme of things, people care about how much money they've got in their pocket rather than what definition of certain words the Green Party tried to choose, right? But on the flip side of that, if the policy doesn't change anything in practice, if it's not something that can be applied practically, are the Green Party wasting time and energy even debating it rather than actually introducing policies that would tackle the actual problem, that would implement more sanctions on the Israeli government, that might apply more boycotts to Israeli goods, for example, that might do more to protect the rights of Palestinians? Like, is there something that could be done that would actually make a difference rather than a debate about definitions? I don't know. And just for the record, and just to clarify, I like I say, I do support the motion, and I do believe and I do agree that Zionism is racism. But I just think it's worth.
No, I think you make a good
that on
point.
the side.
I do think you make a good point, because could this create unnecessary divisions when at the end of the day what matters the most is the policy against Israel? And if we all agree that it's a genocide, and we all agree that we want to stop arms sales to Israel, and we want to implement BDS, then does it really matter? So I think that's a good point. One thing I want to kind of insert in there, maybe just to think about, is that I do think a lot of political parties or political factions will speak up for Palestinians and say the right thing when it's kind of comfortable. Like, more and more people can say, yeah, right, it's an apartheid state, yeah, it's a genocide, whatever, and that's it. But it's noteworthy that Lubna Spiten is Palestinian, and when do Palestinians get to have their own voice in a political party?
True.
We have Jewish blocs in all political parties, right? Jewish people have a voice, but Palestinians don't get their voice. They might be a bit uncomfortable, might cause a bit of controversy.
True. Although I think it's worth remembering that the Green Party was the first political party. In fact, I think it was when I went into conference that officially declared that they believed that what was happening in Palestine was a genocide. It's party policy now. That was voted on by members. That I think I might be wrong. I think we're still the only party in the UK that recognises officially in its policy as what's happening as a genocide. Um, so I don't know. I don't know if I get it, and I understand. And you know what? This will go back to the members in autumn in Brighton, and we'll see. But I have no
Mm.
doubt whatsoever that this motion will get passed at conference if an extraordinary conference isn't called between now and the autumn in order to pass this motion, because that is something that Green Party policy allows for. I'd
Yeah.
be very surprised if it happens. But if members want to try and call an extraordinary conference, there is a procedure in place for that to happen. And we could have another, it'll be online, I imagine, but we could have another weekend in a few months from now, before the autumn, where we get a chance to vote on it again. What I am worried about, though, is that the press are now just going to run with this for the next 6 months. For the rest of the year, it's going to be, oh well, this is what the Green Party think about Jews. And when you
Mm.
couple that with the way that they've responded to the text message that we just looked at in the other story, that again, if you actually read it, doesn't say what the press say it says, and the constant smears of anti-Semitism against the only Jewish leader of a political party in the UK, I do think it will, for people who, for your average person who isn't a close follower of politics, I think it is something else to add fuel, where they'll look at that and go, oh well, maybe the Green Party are anti-Semitic then, in the same way that they fell for it with Corbyn, because unless you're inside it and you actually understand the nuances and the differences, unfortunately the headlines do work. And actually, interestingly, I have had conversations as recently as last week on the doorstep whilst out with the Green Party with people who have said, and I'm hearing this more now than I was, that they think our leader's a complete and utter nutcase. And I mean, it's great they know who the leader is, because there were journalists in Gorton and Denton who didn't know who Adrian Ramsey was. So at least people on the doorstep know who Zach is. But I am hearing more and more now than I think I was even 2 months ago. People on the doorstep who have concerns about Zach, and I think a lot of that has come from the recent smears. And
Yeah, yeah,
some
yeah.
some of it'll stick.
People. Some look.
But
No one's immune from propaganda. I did want to quickly go through just a few more tweets from Gary Spedding, which is very interesting when talking about anti-Semitism weaponization. Gary says, another elephant in the room is the efforts to manufacture a Green Party anti-Semitism scandal. This has clearly been a coordinated effort involving some dubious reporting about the views of Zach Polanski's family, which is responded to robustly. The only other evidence of anti-Semitism in the Green Party has been a single series of WhatsApp messages from one individual. It is hardly an anti-Semitism crisis. And you ask me, that WhatsApp conversation wasn't even anti-Semitic. Many Jewish Greens have told me that they have not experienced anti-Semitism in their local party groups. One Jewish Green said, I regard my local party as a safe space and haven't experienced any anti-Semitism. In my local party, I've so far not heard anything anti-Semitic. I've heard some anti-immigration stuff once from an older member, but he was a minority. The same Jewish Green member then made clear that just because they hadn't experienced anti-Semitism doesn't mean they're saying it isn't there at all. But the idea that Jews should be terrified of the Green Party being some Islamist anti-Semitic monster is ludicrous and nasty. So even when the media are trying to say that the Greens are this hotbed of anti-Semitism, that is accounts from Jewish Green members who are saying it's a safe place. I've not experienced any anti-Semitism.
And also, just quickly before we move on, I do think it's also worth pointing out, and I know some people would argue and say, oh well, that's just tokenism or whatever, but you've got to also remember that Zach Polanski was elected with a massive majority of the membership, and the huge numbers that we have seen of people joining the party. Look, I'm happy to give credit where it's due to the mass membership and the machines that have been out knocking on doors and talking to people. But let's be really honest here, and also the people behind the scenes at the top. I mean, there's been, Gorton and Denton had a fantastic team of people at the top, but let's be real here. the vast majority of new members have joined for two reasons. One, because of Zach Polanski, and two, because of how well Zach Polanski has communicated the Green Party policies. And would all those people join a party with a very, open and very, a man who is very vocal about his Jewish ancestry and his well, and the fact that he's gay as well, but a man who's very open about the fact he's Jewish, would all those people join the party and previous to that vote for a man who was Jewish if they were all a bunch of anti-Semites that absolutely hated Jewish people? Like, if you're anti-Semitic and you believe that Jewish people are trying to take over the world, or you believe all the nonsense anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, you're not going to elect a Jewish man into a position of power. Like, it just makes no sense. It's like expecting, it's like expecting Reform UK to get rid of Nigel Farage and elect an asylum seeker who came by a small boat to be the leader of the party. Like, it's not going to fucking happen.
It wouldn't happen. No.
It wouldn't happen.